Hi, everyone. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, for this episode of The Agronomists. Welcome here. Lovely to see everybody already very active in the comments. I have a feeling this particular show is going to be one of many, many comments and questions. I'm going to introduce our guests in a moment, but before I get to them, yes, good evening, John. Thanks for beating me to the punch on that one. Shout out, of course, to Peter Johnson and Ray DeBenko. Who are in the comments, Warren here in my neck of the woods, and Canadian Cowman, who says that they're cutting hay out in the Fraser Valley after 100 millimeters of rain. I'm going to guess they get, 5, 6 cuts of hay? I have no idea. I'm making things up. But they get a lot. I'll say that much. Okay. So tonight we are talking field trials, field data, collection, analysis, running a good trial, all of those things. And I am going to pretend that I'm much smarter than I am, because this to me is all a big mystery. So I'm going to bring in my guests, the experts, and I do want to tip of the hat to Jenn Sabourin here, who was in the field just moments ago, but still managed to join us. So Jenn, welcome here. Jenn's from
Thanks,
Antara
Lyndsey.
Agronomy in southern Manitoba. Yes, and Aaron Breimer, who's at Chatham in Ontario. Now, Aaron, I'll start with you. Have you been getting these torrential downpours that other areas like Bruce County and down into Lambton, that sort of stuff, have been getting, or are you relatively dry?
Yeah, Thursday and Friday we got a total of about 3 inches of rain. Then the tap turned off. It looked like there was some lake effect rain coming in off of Lake Huron that was getting Bruce County and big chunks of Huron and Middlesex. So I would imagine there's a few guys starting to get a little frustrated.
Yeah, I've heard certainly some very soupy fields out there, and some crops still, even some beans still out, which is not nice in those really wet areas. Now, Jen, of course, you're in southern Manitoba, plenty of dryness most of the season, but what is keeping you busy these days?
Well, surprisingly enough, we actually had accumulation of about 3 inches in the last week. So today was the first day we could actually get back into the fields. Around here, we're basically there's a couple of soybean fields maybe that have to get finished up, but other than that, it's corn and sunflowers. So today, I between harvesting trials, soil sampling, and just all those seasonal things, that's what's keeping us hopping over here.
Oh, harvesting trials. It's so perfect. It's
Yep.
fresh right there. Living the dream. All right. And Peter Johnson would like everyone to know that everyone is waiting for this break in the weather to get more wheat in. So that's his plug. So you're welcome, Pete. Okay. So yes, and Warren says that his wheat looks great, but it will be a shame when it winter kills. We Of course, it's probably going to die 3 times, Warren, right? We have to kill it 3 times? Okay. All right. Both of you, thank you so much for joining me here tonight. I do have a couple clips lined up, but as regular watchers of this program know, we very rarely get to all of them. We might not get to any of them, because the two of you have done a fantastic job also collecting all sorts of visuals for us and things to talk about. So I wanna back things up right to the beginning. We are talking about, of course, field trials, field data collection. Aaron, I'll start with you. What in your mind is the best place to start?
That's a good question. So I guess I'll pick on my favorite thing, and that's just soil testing. When you're looking at any trials, you really need to understand the soil test data that's setting up that field, and how that soil test data is going to interact with whatever you're testing. Whether it's if you're testing for a fungicide, say something like white mold, you want to keep an eye on the different levels of organic matter. If you're looking at something like sulfur or boron, you're going to want to keep an eye on the CEC, where it's sandier or low organic matter, things like that. So understanding and anything that you're going to test, understanding what your soil test levels are and how they vary across the field. In my opinion, that's where you start.
All right, Jen, and how about with you? When you get to start brand new client or brand new field, where do you start?
Well, for us, what we're looking at is to help producers answer their questions. So, does a farmer want to know what best management practices he should be adopting, or even better, which ones he should be stop using? Like, just because it's been something that you've done on your farm for, say, a few generations doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the best in terms of ROI or, it depends on what the farmer wants. So for us, we really start with their questions and then we go from there.
Okay. Now, Aaron, we've got a couple of really good slides, and I want to dig into a little bit on what makes either a good farm trial or field trial, and then maybe on top of that is what makes for good data. So, Aaron, I'll maybe start with you. And this is part of the conversation I want to have here for sure is just that basic understanding of the data we're collecting, and how we sort of start to analyze it. And maybe we'll even get into some of those fun slides that include Nicolas Cage. But you just let us know when we get there. But so yeah, we'll start with what makes a good trial.
So I guess I consider myself very lucky. My background, my experience is what I would describe as traditional agronomy, in that I spent a lot of time walking fields, talking to farmers, understanding their operations. But over about the last 5 to 10 years, I've transitioned more into a consulting role. And I would say the last 4 years, I've had the pleasure to work with, well, her job title is my director of data science, and it's Dr. Jordan Sinclair. So I'll throw a plug in there for her. And Jordan's PhD is in ecology, which might seem a little strange for her to be spending her career in agriculture now. But ecology is all about understanding relationships. And Jordan's background before her PhD, both her undergrad and master's, were in applied mathematics. So when it comes to understanding statistics and data, I'm really spoiled in that I've got that excellent resource in my office to be able to call upon. And she's also pretty good at keeping me on the straight and narrow, which can be a challenge at times. And one of the things that Jordan has taught me is this concept of confirmation biases, in that quite often when we're setting up trials, we may not knowingly do it, but we set up our trials in such a way that we might get the answer that we're hoping for. And so that's ultimately this idea of confirmation biases. And one of the things that we can often find, and I see the data coming up. Actually, let's go back one more slide there, Sean. Right there, perfect. Oh, where you were there. That's where we were.
There we go.
This is something we often hear, is this whole correlation does not equal causation. So here's the one that I grabbed off the internet earlier today. The argument that glyphosate causes autism. My personal opinion, this is not true, and the reason being is if you go forward one, Sean, you're going to see there's autism and organic food sales. So just because they're correlated does not mean it's actually causing things. So this is a case of confirmation biases, that if you look at the data enough different ways and cut it enough different ways, you can ultimately prove it, or ultimately get it to say whatever you want to say. We got a couple other fun ones here. If Sean wants to go forward one slide. And there, so you can see, just go back one more. I know Lyndsey really wants to see Nicolas Cage, but so you can see here we have very strong correlation between ice cream sales and shark attacks. I'm an avid scuba diver, so this had me very concerned when I first seen this data set. Now, obviously, there's a reason for it. Is there's another variable that we're not taking into consideration, and if you look at the months, that tells the secret. There is it's the temperature, right? So we enjoy ice cream when it's nice and warm out, and when is it warm? Well, that's also when we're swimming, and when we're swimming, that's probably got your better incidence of shark attacks. And if you want to go forward one more funny one, this is the infamous the number of films Nicolas Cage has appeared in, and the number of people who have drowned falling into a pool. You can see a pretty strong correlation there too. That one clearly, that's just random chance. So
I'm going to disagree with you on that one, Aaron. I feel like this might be one we should dig into further. I mean, really.
clearly you're not a Nicolas Cage fan. I can appreciate that.
Well, I do like it when people go around other people's houses and replace pictures randomly with pictures of Nicolas Cage to see how long it takes for them to notice. I'm a big fan of that. If everyone could do that, um, carry on. I have to throw it out there.
So yeah, no,
Yeah.
I fully hear you on that. But yes, that's a classic example of that correlation, not equal causation. Um, it, and ultimately, what I tell farmers when they're setting up trials and they're doing, because they've got so many cool tools that they can do all kinds of stuff themselves. Bounce off their results, their findings, their conclusions with other people, and listen to some of the suggestions about how you're setting up your trials. What might be some other underlying issues? One of the challenges we have here in Ontario, I'm not sure if it happens in other parts of the country, but farmers might get a little rammy in the spring trying to get the crop in, and we get a little bit of compaction on the headlands. So if you've got those headlands included in your data set, that might cause an issue. I refer to that headland effect as the red ring of death, just because when it's there, boy, oh boy, does it ever look nasty.
All right, now, Jen, sort of building off of that, I mean, for sure, we come into these things sometimes with either a preconceived notion or maybe a result we really want or are looking for. How do you sort of navigate that, with a client or while you're setting up a trial? How do you set up sort of the expectation of, we've got to do it a certain way, we've got to let the data tell the story?
Right. Well, and Aaron kind of touched on it that, they work with individual producers, whereas we have a research group, a peer group, and there's anywhere between like 15 to 20 producers. They each host 2 trials per season. And what I do try to do is, well, as I mentioned earlier, I want the producer to be interested in the trial. So therefore they're allowed to have, well, they're the ones that pick the trials that get or that they host. But I also try to replicate those on a few other farms within a small like we're within a 20-25 mile radius, because we're trying to really compare apples to apples, keep the topography, keep the soil types, the weather. We're trying to keep all of those variables as similar as possible. And so then the producers are the ones that, they're interested in this, so they're going to want to follow it through, because Aaron also said, spring or fall, like when either seeding or harvest, sometimes it's a time crunch, and if they're not interested in what they're trying to find out with these trials, they'll just like, doesn't matter, like let's just harvest and it doesn't matter anymore. So then, there's a season's worth of data that's out the window. But so really what we try to do is the producers, they host 2 trials, but they're going to get answers from all of the trials. So therefore we share within the group all of the data, and we do not cherry pick. We show everything. As Aaron mentioned, you avoid the headlands. We take a look at placement, because that's also very important. We want to transect the topography. So if we have like ditches and things like that, we take a look at equipment widths. We want to make sure that we don't have a set of sprayer tracks in one trial strip and then not in the other, because that you could be damaging, say 2 acres, for example, but then that 2 acres across several treatments, because we replicate up to 6 times. Therefore you can start to show a bias inadvertently just by those kinds of things. So we really take a look at things right from the beginning all the way to the end, and then it's a group effort. And so all the participants know that other farmers are interested in their results as well. And this is, like I'd mentioned at the beginning, that it's something that the farmers are interested in knowing, things that they should be adapting, new seed treatments. Should they be trying that? Should they be stopping certain things? Like, should we be stopping tillage? Should we just be doing, fertilizer in the spring? Which is tricky here in the Red River Valley. That's kind of it's a roll of the dice. But so really, we want the farmers as involved as possible, because we're working on their land with their equipment, with their interests, and we're trying to build their ROI, their bottom line. And of course, it's going to change every year as Mother Nature changes her forecast.
Now, John has a comment here, and Jen, I think this is important. I'm also from southern Manitoba, so when you say 20-mile radius, I understand that you can actually have very little change in a lot of things in that 20 miles. But John, of course, where he's at, 20-mile radius would be huge swings in soil type and perhaps, lake effect snow, perhaps all those sorts of things. So, I mean, what would be the ideal range, and why in Manitoba is that okay?
Well, we're kind of considered the bottom of the barrel here because, well, so we're located right in St. Jean, Manitoba, which is right along the Red River, and so when you move away from the river, uh, as Lake Agassiz regressed, we tend to have a lot of similar soil types. We're very heavy clays here. You do start to see a little bit sandier, sandy loam as you move about 20-25 miles either direction, east or west from the river. So it does sound to be like a huge radius, but that we actually are staying within fairly similar soil types.
Okay. Yes, and as John mentioned, it may not be soil type that's the biggest factor, but again, when you're down in southern Ontario and you've got those giant bodies of water that have impacts on temperature or streamers or rainfall patterns, can have a really huge impact. 5 miles, 10 miles difference, absolutely. So one of those huge factors that Jen and Aaron, you both, I mean, you're trying to account for as much variability as possible, but again, you've got so many things that can really change that you have to try very hard to keep things as consistent as possible. So now, Aaron, you of course have a team as well. And as you mentioned, I think most, if anyone likes crunching numbers, they would love to have someone with a mathematics background in their office. But to me, we farm as well. We don't really, I mean, we take data from our sheep flock and those sorts of things. But like beyond soil tests and that sort of stuff, it's like the number stuff starts to make my head explode. So how do you make it approachable and manageable for every farmer? Because I know that obviously there's going to be farmers that are super into this. I mean, Warren, if you follow Warren Schneckenberger on Twitter, I'm not even sure how he does all the things he does in a day and all the trials and all the adaptations and all that. So obviously some are going to love it, but there's value in this for so many. And as Jen, as your groups are showing as well, you get to share those results. So Aaron, how do you make something like data management and collection approachable for more farmers?
Well, my business model is that the farmers don't have to do it. The farmers get to do what they want to do, which is farm. Like Jen said, I listen to them very closely as to what their questions are and what we're trying to understand as what is their limiting factor. And then the group that I get to work with, we go to work to basically set up the trials inside of the equipment. So one of the ways that we do a lot of our trials, we use like a randomized check block design. I'm not sure if Sean's got some examples there that I sent over in my presentation. Um, Sean, it would be one that is mostly green squares with a couple red squares in there if you're looking through it. But if you go to the PowerPoint presentation, you can
Yeah, there you go.
2 slides down.
There you go. I think I see it.
Yep. So what we do is we actually insert the check block, what we call our check blocks directly in. So yeah, 2 slides down there, Sean. Um, Okay, one more. There we go, and one more click, and you should have it perfect. So that's how we do our testing. At least some of our testing. There are definitely lots of growers that are very comfortable with check strips, and so we'll set it up with a check strip. This particular slide, what we're looking at is how different soil types are interacting with it. So anyone who's big into stats will understand the value of having lots of replications. So that's our approach here. Um, so yeah, that to answer your question, Lyndsey, it's we don't expect the farmers to do much work besides run their equipment, and then we will assist them in pulling the data off monitors or out of their cloud system that they're storing data. We will help them correlate multiple combines. or combine multiple combines, all the nasty stuff that if they really wanted to, yeah, there's lots of great tools to be able to pull that data all together. But I guess we become the easy button for them. So yeah, it's myself. I don't file my own taxes. Well, I guess I file my own taxes, but I don't prepare them. I take them to an accountant, right? And a lot of farmers are going to go to an agronomist with their fertility questions. So yeah, I guess we're just we're data agronomists.
Mhm.
There you go. Now, so Jen, you work a bit of a different model, but working with that group of farmers. So how important then is the support that your organization, your business offers then to that group?
Well, we do have like we offer full agronomy, and as part of the research group, we do full agronomy on all of those different on the sites that are hosting a trial. And sometimes we do notice different things. We could be picking up like insects that are major pests. One year we could be picking up different resistant weeds or something like that, just because we are in there doing agronomy for them. So we're kind of an extra set of eyes. But what really comes down to it is that we're able to really gather that data like together, and then we're learning 2-3 times or more as quickly as if someone was just to replicate the trial themselves on their own farm year after year after year. So we can learn as quickly as well. If we replicate it 3, 4, 5 times in 1 year, that's how fast we're learning. I did just want to mention one thing. I saw a couple of the questions pop up about when I mentioned a 20-25 mile radius, is that we don't have large bodies of water where I am in Manitoba. So it is like the bald prairies. Like we have wind farm like just a few miles from us because it is so terribly windy. Like we don't, and I understand like Lake Winnipeg, Lake Manitoba, you would have the lake effect, but that is a couple of hours north of us. So we're only 18 miles off the American border. We have pretty consistent weather. So yeah, that's where we can get away with using a 20-25 mile radius. But
Yeah.
but again, that's where we do track the weather. We are looking at the different rotations, and we are trying to, essentially what we're trying to do is just bring it back to the farmers and say, this is what we're finding, this is what what we think might be a good practice. For example, 2 years ago we did some tillage before in front of soybeans. Well, the way that the tilled strips came up, I thought, okay, hands down, tilling before soybeans, it's a no-brainer. Look at them, they're already at like the first trifoliate, and the other ones are just, the hooks are coming out with all the residue. That okay, no, we're done. Lo and behold, that field, like the no-till, outdid it out yielded the tilled strips. But we did have a lot of wind erosion. We had like really crazy winds, so the plants were damaged. So just to say that, we take a look at a certain practice and we go, okay, let's try this out. But we'll also remember that it's just 1 year on one site, which then we do need to replicate to try and see before we ever make a recommendation to potentially change those practices.
And I did want to, sorry, just quickly, I want to add, as Kelvin Hepner here at Real Agriculture, he farms at Altona. He says if they have a 6-inch grade difference in like a mile, that's a lot. So
Yep.
it's very flat, it's very open, it's very consistent.
Yep.
And when I look at, coming from that area, when I look at soil maps of Ontario, I think it's like a paint by number. Like even Aaron, what you just showed on that map, it's remarkable to me how these teeny little pockets of soil types can change so dramatically. It's a whole different world. Now there are some good questions coming in, and Aaron, I'm sure you're expecting some from Peter. So Aaron wants to know, why not one, and I think he used L, but anyway, why not one strip field length of each treatment, just as validation of the veri-blocks? So I like this challenging. So that map that you had up there, you've got the trial, you've got your verification blocks, right? So why not a strip field length?
So yes, Peter mentioned that he knew I was going to ask this because Peter has asked this question to me several times. So I would have thought he would have been listening, but apparently not.
He's a slow learner.
And to be honest, depending on how you set it up, Peter, you can still get very good data from it. Statistically speaking, if you are looking at just one strip against one strip beside of it, you cannot run any stats on that. You have to segment that strip somehow, right? Now, you can choose to segment it with vertical sectioning all the way along. Peter and I worked on a big strip till project, and that was how we were able to increase the number of replications to be able to test that. And one of the other reasons why I like to have those randomized blocks scattered around is it allows me to take into consideration more soil type variability, because I'm really interested not just how does treatment A compare to treatment B, but also how does treatment A compare to treatment B when the phosphorus levels are increasing or decreasing. So by having more variables. Now, that said, I and Peter and I are on the same page, at least I think we are, that this would be a great area for an up-and-coming grad student who wanted to do their master's and or PhD to understand things that which approach is best. I think it would be great. One other thing I did want to, now that I get a chance to speak, Jenn, I got a quick question for you. When you talk about all of your different trials within that 20-25 mile radius, I'm assuming you are still treating those trials as separate trials. You're not combining the data all into one big monster data set. The combined data set is individual trials that you're looking at, and we do the same thing.
Absolutely. So we represent every single trial or every single site as it's its own location. But so in the booklet that we produce at the end of the season, you'll see the different trials, and if they're replicated on 3, 4, 5 different fields in different locations. So then those are all grouped in one section of the booklet, but yet we represent all the replications, and generally we do replicate 6 times. Sometimes we do have to modify and go down to like say 4 or 5 replications, depending on how many treatments we have and just the size of the field that the farmer has chosen to use. However, just with experience, we and as you would know as well, the more data that we collect, the stronger our statistics. But we also know that somebody can come in and we can have a mishap at harvest, starts combining in the wrong area. We can have insects, we can have disease, we can have all sorts of things, hail, we can have, who knows what's going to happen throughout the year. So we need to have at least, I like to have a minimum of 4 replications. We do not cherry pick any of our data. We represent it all. However, we do offer explanations why we may have seen certain yields in certain areas of the field based on all of our observations throughout the season. But you are correct. We do not combine the values together. Every single treatment strip that was put into a location is represented at that location, and then the next location will have its own section.
Okay, yeah. Very cool. Now, there's a few really good questions that have come in, and I like where we're going with this, so we'll tackle them one at a time. So John asked, let's say I'm a newbie starting out. Obviously, the yield data is the first piece of info I want. So if someone is scaling into data collection, what data do you want next, and then what after that? So Aaron, maybe we'll start with you, because I know we started with the discussion of soil tests at the very beginning. But farmers, of course, love that yield map, right? They want to know yield. They want to know, and that's sort of what we sort of cling to of what we want. So if you're starting with a new client, they're pretty new to this, how do you bring them into this data collection mode?
So, John, that's a great question. I've been during different presentations, I've gone over all the multitude of different data layers that you can work with and create insights from. What I will tell you is, in my personal opinion, the most important data layer that I work with is the data layer between the farmer's ears. It's their experience of the farm. It's their understanding, and being able to talk to them and to understand the history of a site. Jenn mentioned hail, classic example. That if there was a strip of hail that went through one section, in Ontario, I get to work with a lot of fields that are a combination of 3 or 4 fields or more. And 20, 25 years after those fields were joined, you can still see where that fence row is. And I might not understand that. And being able to take that into consideration when I'm designing my trials, absolutely critical. After that, then yeah, soil test, soil test, soil test. I'm not familiar with how consistent the soil is that Jenn is talking about it. I must admit I'm somewhat envious that she can take that into consideration. Um, but yeah, understanding the soil test, and then I would say the last one is to understand what is their equipment capabilities. How complex do they want to get? For example, if they don't have all the fancy precision ag technology on their seeders or planters or sprayers, then my check block system is not going to work. Then I'm going to have to rely on Peter's approach. Um, so yeah, it
Mhm.
comes down to having some deep conversations, and I think Jenn, you touched on that too at the beginning.
So Jenn, I mean, similar question to you, and how do you deal with this question of when you have a new client? How do you sort of ease them into all this?
Sure. And like it's a great question because like when they first start working with us, like you can just see like their stress level is just up there. They're like, oh, I'm not sure. Like seeding, it's just such a tight window. We can get a rain. Oh, and here if we get a rain, with the heavy clays that we have, we can be out of the fields for a little bit, and then such a short growing season, we don't have those nice lake effects that you guys have out east. So, if we lose a week or more, then the panic button starts to get pushed, and I kind of call it grumpy farmer syndrome. So that that that
Right.
may or may not start to show up. And but really what we do is we plan from the end going forward. So I sit down and I ask, okay, I want to know dimensions. I want to know how wide is like the header, what is your sprayer, what is your, like, all the widths of all the equipment that we're going to be using, because then that tells me, okay, can we put one pass and still be able to clean up nicely at harvest, or do we need to do a round in order to have enough space to be able to, because we use a weigh wagon. So they do come, they harvest, they dump into the weigh wagon. I take the weight. I know exactly, the width of the equipment that we're using. I know the length that we're harvesting. Therefore, I know exactly how many acres. I can do the calculations. Then when I come back to the shop, I don't have my moisture tester at the field with me. I just do all of that back at the shop, and then we adjust for moisture levels, and really we provide all of that planning to the farmers so that they can see it all laid out really well, and they go, oh, okay, really all I have to do is like flip this switch here and flip that switch there. Yep, that's exactly. I'm like, as long as you can make the equipment do what we need it to do, and it's nothing as intricate, Aaron, as what you had. Our treatments are usually one full pass where it's around. And so then if we're replicating 6 times, we'll put in those treatments, and then we'll switch up, and then we'll do the next treatment, and then we'll put those in. If we have 3 treatments, we're using a randomized complete block design. If I have just 2 treatments, then we're just alternating strips, because we don't want to have just one side of the field comparison against the next, because as you had mentioned, there's all those different soil characteristics. There's topography that we have to look at. So we don't want to just have one side of the field against the next. That's not going to give you the data that or you might get the data that you want, but it's not going to be a fair trial. So
Right. Now, Gord's got a good question here, and I think this question does come up, and I mean, as you've both explained, obviously what a farmer is starting with as far as equipment, land base, I mean, that's what their starting point. So you got to figure out what you can and cannot do at that point. But is there sort of a magical number? And obviously this is going to be very different between East and West, but Aaron, for where you're at, is there sort of a number of acres that a farmer is covering where the ROI is just there and it's well worth the investment, and to carry that added cost and to add that level of management? Is there a rule of thumb of where that tipping point is?
So my personal belief is if a farmer is solely looking to invest in precision ag technology to be able to um, do some of these incredible things with data, that's lost cause. Um, where precision ag is adding value to farmers is around making their lives easier. Um, the data that I work with, it's a case of, okay, I've got this technology because I wanted to utilize auto steer, and I'm collecting this data. What else can I do with it? Starting off and saying, okay, I want to figure out what is the optimum rate of phosphorus on corn in Huron County. Um, what technology do I need to purchase? Honestly, I don't think there is a number that will justify that. But when a farmer is going out and investing in new seeding technology, new crop protection technology, new harvest technology, and the amount of incredible things that all this new equipment can do, and they want to know what else can they do with it, okay, then we're talking on the same level.
And Jen, same question for you. Is there
Yeah.
really a minimum, do you think?
I'm just going to echo what Aaron said. I think the value comes from actually taking all the data that all your pieces of equipment that you already have, that they're collecting, and actually analyzing them and actually doing something with it. And if you don't want to do that yourself, then find someone who has those abilities to do that, because it's incredible what you are capturing every time that your different machines are crossing your field. But it's lost information. It's lost if it just kind of sits in the cloud, or it sits on that card in whichever piece of equipment you have, and you don't ever take it out and look at it. And sometimes people might say, oh, well, it's too expensive, or it's just an extra cost that I don't want to hire someone to analyze it for me. But if you think about how you're collecting all that data every time, you can take a look at how, on a per field basis, how it is performing. Maybe there's always a specific area that is always producing better. And Aaron kind of mentioned before, well, maybe back in the day that's where there was an old farmyard, and that's where the barns were, so the animals were kept there, so you have higher organic matter. And if you aren't necessarily soil sampling, you may not, or if it's a composite sample, you may not be able to pick out why that particular area is producing better versus another. Those kinds of things, you can start to tease out those kinds of intricacies from your data if you look at it. So is there an amount that you need to spend, or is there, like, our trials are usually like 30 to 40 acres on average, again, depending on treatments, or number of treatments. But I've never taken a look at actually having to spend or like a certain amount on particular equipment. But yeah, like, is it worth purchasing a strip till unit? That's something that we're looking at getting going. Those are trials that are producers in our area are looking at, like, can we reduce soil erosion, or like wind erosion, water erosion, by doing some strip tilling? Does it work? So that would be, I guess, sort of a trial aimed at spending some significant money on a piece of equipment. We just haven't done it yet.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, there's a couple questions that have come in, and Lara asked a good one. So we're going to geek out about data for just a moment. What's your approach to outliers? So when you get those weird little dots out in the middle of nowhere, do you have like a what the heck, or how do you handle that? What's your process? Who wants to go first? Neither.
Okay,
Okay,
I
Aaron.
can.
Okay, Jen can.
We see, so because we offer full field agronomy, while like on that particular field, like if we're not doing agronomy for like the whole farm already, if it's just for like the site that we are actually like host, or where there's a trial, we look for everything. Like, so we're taking a look at weeds, disease, insects. We're taking a look at weather, water accumulation over the season. We're following through, taking a look if it's corn, and are we having issues with pollination, or is it tasseling before the silk syrup, those kinds of things. So we're always making all these observations, and we try to there's different times of the season that we'll be in the fields more frequently than others, but generally we try to be there once a week or so. And it's just, we just explain it through observation, and then we do not cherry pick our data. Because when you do show all your averages, if you have a certain replicate that did not produce well or didn't yield well, of course it's going to pull your averages down. We do sometimes pull that replicate out and say that we have like big bold letters, big squares saying, here's the answer, or here's your averages without this replicate, because we're seeing a trend. But there still is, we never pull it out completely and just say, oh yeah, here's the 5 replicates instead of the 6. So that's what we do. Like, we're extremely transparent, because not everything is going to be 100% game changer, and it might work one year, might not work the next year. And you just have to keep trying it. You have to try and try and try.
Aaron, how about you?
So I guess it depends on the definition of outliers. I was thinking of it from a little different perspective, but a lot of our analysis actually uses as applied or harvest data coming out of the equipment monitors themselves, and those can have some really weird outliers, right? The guy slams on the brakes on the combine, and all of a sudden you got 2,000 bushels per acre of corn, and really silly things like that. We have a set of data rules that basically kicks out weird. I'd call them weird data points that just they're wrong. And we use statistical terms like standard deviations and things like that to be able to, for lack of a better term, scrub the data to get rid of some of that weird stuff. Going along with Jen's comment, we excluding that stuff. I keep all of every result as well in all of our summaries, and yeah, same idea. Is you can put a comment and say, hey, these 3 fields were abnormally dry because there was a drought in the area. This field had a suspected hailstorm go through, and you can offer some explanation around that.
All right, now for those of us who are not stats and data people, we're going to move into the next question that came in that's a little softer, the softer skills, which are, I'm going to argue, more important, but whatevs. What's a mistake that agronomists make when consulting farm customers in relation to data tools? So what are some of the pitfalls that perhaps you've seen or, your neighbor has done in that agronomists make when they're consulting their farm clients in relation to these data tools?
Jen, you want to go first, or you want me to go?
I think it's your turn, Aaron.
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah, it's Aaron's turn.
So the number one that I see all the time is everybody telling farmers how easy it is to work with their data. Yes, the platforms are designed to give a positive user experience, and there's a lot of money invested in the user interface. But if farmers are not using it every day, it is not easy. Stop telling them that it's easy. It's not easy for them. I grew up in the 1980s. I remember thinking how easy it was to program the clock on my parents' VCR. And to me, it was easy. It was not easy to my parents, right? And no matter how many times I told them it was easy, it wasn't going to make it any easier. And I know the time will come, i.e. my IT department, when I have to call them and ask them to set up a printer driver in my computer. Then they tell me, Aaron, it's super easy. I'm like, I have to do this once every 5 years when I get a new laptop. It is not easy. Knock it off.
It's kind of true. Yeah. Printers actually, I think, are designed to be difficult. So I'll just put that one out there. I'm quite certain it is. All right, Jen, your turn. Take a stab at it.
Well, I think for us, you want to make sure that farmers remember that the data that we're collecting and presenting it's a summary from like it's a snapshot from one season. So we need to keep that in mind. So if we can start to, our group has been like this is our 5th season now. So we can start to take a look at some of the trends that we can start to tease out from some of the trials that we've repeated year after year, and we can start to go, okay, like when we see a fall and then say like a winter spring sort of setup, the way that for example, super dry, we've been in a dry spell, even though I said we just had a bit of rain this week, but it has been extremely dry. So if you see that sort of setup, these are the results that we've been seeing from those growing seasons. So that might help with are you going to I don't know, cut back on your seeding rate? Are you going to use that seed treatment? I'm not sure. I'm just, are you going to do that extra passive cultivation? Try to keep that moisture in the soil, those kinds of things. So these are all, they're all thoughts, but this also a snapshot from that one season. And then also the other thing we have to remember is that we need to make sure that equipment is calibrated. When we go into a trial, we only allow one combine in, and then we're using our weigh wagon, or we will use the cart with a scale, but it is to be parked. We don't take, we're not unloading on the fly. We're taking a sample, and even if the yield is going to be off, say by 5%, because it wasn't calibrated perfectly, it'll still be off 5% throughout the whole trial. If we had two combines in there, then we really can't, like, it's just another variable that you're adding. So that is like one of my biggest thing, is just to make sure that we have everything organized so that we just have that equipment running in those areas. And the way, like I had mentioned earlier, the way that we have it work, that we know exactly what their equipment widths are, that we really have it planned so that it's very, very efficient at harvest. And after the first season with us, most farmers are like, oh, that was actually really fast and you didn't slow me down that much. And I'm like, because we've taken all that thought out of the whole thing for them. And then they just really have to run their equipment. We do force them to stop to unload, because generally I'm one of us is getting a sample. So, that wouldn't be very ideal to be doing that on moving equipment, but
Please don't,
and then,
no.
yeah. And then we have our weights, and like we adjust for moisture, and then we can be very confident in the yields and the results that we're getting.
Now, Jason Voogt here, from not far from you, of course, Jenn. Great
Yep.
question here. So this is sort of continuing with our outlier discussion. But when there's excess moisture or extreme drought, so those extremes, how do you make the decision? Where's that line of keeping a trial in or punting it? Now, I'm going to guess there's 2 parts to this. There's the production practicality side of, are you actually going to calculate it when you harvest, whatever? And then there's the, do we include that data, which I think we sort of covered. But Aaron, Jenn, I'd love your thoughts on this, on how do you sort of decide when a trial is kaput?
Sure. So yeah, nope, I know Jason, and definitely we, like this year, like I've mentioned, we've had a drought, and what we do is, we put in the work, we put in the effort, we maintain that trial, we take it right to harvest, and we still represent everything, because we do collect moisture data as well. We can say, look, this crop was grown off of 4 inches of rain. So right there, so if you say, oh, I've just harvested 45 or 50 bushel corn instead of 135 bushel corn, that there's your explanation right there. But it also, to me, if you were to just drop the trial because, oh, well, it's not a good growing condition, can anyone tell me what a perfect growing condition is, and do they ever exist?
I believe in Ontario. Yes, they do. So I'm just kidding. Yeah, but Aaron, how do you and your team make that call of keeping a trial in, or drawing a line of, this is just, it's toast, we're done?
So for me, similar to what Jenn is saying, weather extremes, for the most part, I'm willing to include that data, unless there's something exceptionally weird happening, i.e., a strip of hail goes through halfway through the farm, or on a weird angle. Okay, One of the things that we had happen not far from Chatham towards the end of June, we had an area that got between 11 and 13 inches of rain in a time frame of about 12 hours. Yes, Jen, it was not good. Um,
No.
and when you have stuff like that happen, okay, your data's probably pooched. I would say the bigger area that I run into questionable data is something that Jen was touching on, is poorly calibrated combines or multiple combines in the field. There's some new software, new platforms out there that allow you to bring that stuff a little bit closer in line. Is it perfect? No. It's one of the reasons why I'm looking at more replications in order to try to overcome that. I like what Jen's doing with having a higher quality of data. A higher quality, maybe lower the number of replications. I'm going with probably lower quality data and more replications. So getting to the same endpoint. But Jason, to answer your question, and unless there's an extreme example, yeah, I'm keeping that data probably 9 times out of 10.
Mm-hmm. And as Warren Farmer Schneck here says, his 2017 monsoon season and 2019 drought season yield maps are incredibly useful, right? So if you're not keeping that data, you're not paying attention to it, how do you learn from it too? Right. Now, I will put a little plug in here, Peter, and you're welcome. Of course, with winter wheat, if it didn't get planted, you can't do those trials. So if everyone, again, could get their winter wheat, and that would be great. And yes, Peter wants to hazard that 2021 corn growing in Ontario has been as near perfect as we can get. But the corn is not in the bin yet, Peter. So if you could just not for a moment, that'd be great. Yeah.
Exactly. Peter, you're wrong again. You talk to guys who have tar spot. You got weak stalks. I can't believe, Peter, how many times you want to be proven wrong by saying stuff like that.
I really do enjoy that Peter and Ray both, really, Ray DeBenko as well, are here almost every Monday, and they put up with our antics and our jokes, and usually in good humor. Anyway, I'm sure I'll get one from Peter so that I stop picking on him. And you know what I failed to do? And I can't believe it. It's almost 9 o'clock. Which, yes, I failed to run any clips, which no one is surprised by. But I failed to mention that Sean, which I'm sure some of you heard us refer to him, Sean was our producer tonight. So Sean Haney, big shout out there. Thanks so much for that. And yeah, it's quite nice when the guests get to order him around. So thanks for doing that for sure. But Peter has put it down. He says we will set a new yield record. Just wait and see. And I think he means corn. So he didn't quite get there with his wheat.
Peter, I was saying that back in July. Come on, catch up, buddy.
There you go. All right. Okay. Yeah, we are out of time. That went so quickly. Shout out to Brunel in the background there, Jen. Anyway, just, we've had cats join the program, so why not? Why not, Brunel Sabourin? Hey, why not? Anyway, yeah. Okay. But thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Jen. This has been fantastic. Fabulous learning. Really appreciate everyone in the comments as well. Great questions. Fantastic discussion. So as always, you can head over to realagriculture.com/agronomists to get your CEU credits tomorrow. We'll have the post up tomorrow morning, so make sure you do that. And we're always taking ideas for new topics, new guests. So if anybody wants to reach out and let us know on something they really would love us to cover, we can do that too. But Jen, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was fun.
All right. And Aaron, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers, everybody. Have a great night.